Oops. Okay, there's someone in the chat already who's saying hello, and their name is That Spoony Trans Guy,
Hey,
which
hey.
I'm here for. Oops, close the settings.
Love the username.
This is awesome. I'm just going to make sure that everybody can see us and hear us and that everything is going well. Please mention in the chat if you can hear and see all five of us. There will be about a minute between me saying that and you hearing it, so don't worry about that. I will also mention that Violet and Isolde cannot make it today because of assorted video is slightly off center. Yeah, that's going to happen. I'm live streaming from my browser in order to get the captions and everybody so you can see them all at the same time. So it's not going to be exactly perfect. Neither is the audio because we're all in many time zones around the world and I can see and hear you. Awesome. Great. So let's start off. My name is Melissa. This is obviously my channel. My username is So Biased. I primarily do sewing and costuming from the 1930s and 40s, primarily World War II. And I do a lot of like history stuff and costuming. I am also disabled. Shocking, knowing the topic of this panel. I had a very bad car accident and fractured 10% of the bones in my body. My ankle never fully healed, so I had to get a prosthetic, and I'm trying to learn to walk with it. And um, so I have problems standing and walking, and running is not a thing for me anymore. So mostly standing and walking, mobility issues, and chronic pain as a result of that. And I will open up to my lovely panel to introduce themselves. Who would like to go first?
I will. I'm
I can.
Ashley.
You go.
I do not have a YouTube channel. I'm fairly new to costuming in general. I started kind of right before the pandemic hit through the SCA, Society for Creative Anachronisms. So I do mostly medieval stuff. In the process of going back to school for a degree in experimental archaeology. So remaking garments is super fun to me, as well as a whole bunch of other random stuff. I have a condition called hypermobile EDS. It's a connective tissue disorder that basically means my collagen is crappy, and collagen's in everything in your body. So you can have issues with pretty much anything. I have a lot of hand and hip dislocation issues, as well as I have a hypo immune system condition, mast cell activation syndrome. So a lot of random allergic reactions to stress and everything else in life, as well as cardiovascular issues and things kind of ebb and flow, but been pretty stable lately. So very grateful for that.
And next?
Yeah, I can go next.
Cool.
So my name's Fallon. I have an Instagram at yourgrandmas_closet. And I learned how to sew about 9 years ago because I was watching anime and I was like, I want to be that character. So I got into everything through cosplay. And then a few years ago, I got really into vintage fashion. I do a huge range, anything from like the 30s to like the 60s, 70s. So that's kind of where my sewing is, but I still do cosplay, especially around Halloween. So that's kind of my sewing background. And as far as my disabilities go, like our last panelist, I also have hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, fibromyalgia, which causes chronic pain, CFS or ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, whatever you call it, irritable bowel syndrome or IBS. And I know there's an entire panel dedicated to ADHD, but I also have ADHD. So for me personally, that causes a lot of neck, shoulder, and back pain, particularly on my left side. Lots of weight changes. So yeah, just a lot of basically what back pain, bad for sewing. Yeah, it's a nightmare. But still kind of figuring things out because I didn't really get diagnosed or develop a lot of these issues until a few years ago. But I'm also a college kid, if you can't tell from my bedroom. So I have pretty limited space and money. So hopefully everything I tell you is free or very cheap. So yeah, that's me.
I don't mind going next. I'm Casca from Crafting with Casca on YouTube. I primarily do a mix of historical sewing, vintage, and historical cosplay, with also some other little things mixed in, like just general art and crochet, stuff like that. Health-wise, I am also a bendy person. I've got the diagnosis of hypermobility spectrum disorder. I've also got fibromyalgia, which causes chronic pain. Main problems I have, my pain are with my back and my legs. I also have a range of mental health stuff going on, and I am on the longest waiting list for a diagnosis of autism. So yeah, that's me.
Hi, I'm Rachel of La Bricoleuse is the name of my YouTube channel. I work as a costumer in the theater. So costuming is my day job. And I also teach it in a graduate program at a university here in the US, in North Carolina. I have a disability in my arm from unsafe work conditions where I worked at what you, I guess, could call a sweatshop. I was working 9 hours a day cutting with a rotary cutter, and the combination of pressing down and pressing forward gave me a repetitive strain injury in my arm such that I can't use a rotary cutter really at all now. I was out with my wrists and braces, not working at all for maybe 2 months after I developed that condition. I also have a neurological diagnosis for something called sarcoidosis, which is, I don't even know what to say that it's like. I guess it's in the sort of spectrum of multiple sclerosis and similar kinds of conditions. And I was diagnosed with it when I was in undergrad, which now is 25, almost 30 years ago. And it never really affected me after that much that I could tell until COVID happened. And then suddenly I was elevated risk for COVID and working from home and all of that. I guess we'll talk about the accommodations that are made in terms of like the fact that I can't cut, yet I work as a costumer is an issue.
That's awesome. I just want to mention in the comments, we have a bunch of comments of Fibro Squad represent. So just that one's fun. At least there's at least two other I was almost said fibroids. Oh my God, that's not what it's called. Fibro folks in the comments. Also, it was not my intention to just pack this panel with people with EDS, although I think both panelists who aren't here also have EDS. But EDS has so many comorbidities that everybody's experience with it is completely different, from like vision and hearing problems, heart problems, being a wheelchair user, having, hypermobility in your hands and pain or back pain or whatever it is. So even though it is technically the same disease or illness, it affects your connective tissue, which you have in your everywhere. So, and it affects everybody differently. And just want to point out Casca's zebra shirt because EDS people call themselves zebras. Long story, you can look that one up and it's really funny. There's another EDSer in the comments. That's great. Loving it. And autism and ADHD and depression. Yeah, we have a ton of intersections in this group too, which was also really important to me, of like being able to talk about neurodiversity and disability, or being a person of color and disability, or queer and disability. And so there's a lot of that here, which I love, and feel free to ask or answer questions about that. But we will start off with the first question, which is, how does your disability affect your sewing and costuming? For me, it's very much cutting, because cutting is almost always done when you're standing up, and I can't. Well, I can, but I don't want it because it hurts. And one of the things I discovered was an electric rotary color. You just go, it cuts through everything, and it is glorious, and it is my best friend. As well as using a foot pedal because of course it's my right foot that is crushed to pieces. So I've had to discover some new ways of using a foot pedal, like turning it around so that I can just use it with my heel. As well as you can put it underneath your knee, under your thigh, and just, lift your leg up and down to operate it that way. That was a fun discovery for me. And yeah, that's kind of it. And then just, yeah, planning out sessions based on pain and what can I do in that day, and then planning around that depending on how many spoons I have that day. All right, who would like to go next?
I can hop on.
Sure.
Oh yeah, something I forgot to say in my introduction, because we're talking about intersectionalities. I'm also queer and half Filipino, so yeah, that's just a little bit more about me. So as far as how disability affects my sewing and costuming, honestly, like what I always tell people is I have a lot going on, but honestly, chronic fatigue syndrome is one of the worst things, because if you're too tired to do something, you can't do anything, It's really hard to, I know, like picking up a needle and thread, like to most people sounds like a pretty low energy activity, but if I've just come home from school or work, I also work, it's kind of impossible. So that's kind of my biggest barrier, is just the tiredness. But once I'm actually sewing, I've mustered up the energy, even if I don't have the energy that day. Really sewing is honestly, specifically machine sewing, is a huge trigger for my fibromyalgia personally. Which, yeah, my physical therapist was not happy at me when I told her that I sewed. So it's honestly just causes a lot of back pain, I have a pretty bad shoulder injury I've been dealing with since it's been like 5 years now. It causes a lot of pain in my neck. So yeah, just a lot of pain in general. And also because I don't have a lot of space, I crawl around on the floor to cut out huge skirts, because I won't wear small skirts. It's not happening ever. So sometimes I can hyperextend my wrists, which is not great. Also, I think all of us get sucked into sewing. You just forget to eat and drink and just shower, take care of yourself. There's something, I was talking to Melissa earlier, there's something about sewing on a machine that just sucks you in. So for me, it's just finding ways to work around that pain and how to prevent that pain. And when you do get that pain, what do you do with it? So I'll be talking about that later.
We had someone in the comments say sitting at the sewing machine is surprisingly exhausting, and I'm here for that.
Totally agree.
Quick mention in the comments of the people who are saying autism and ADHD and depression, carpal tunnel, autism here too, temporary disability with frozen shoulder and undiagnosed neurodivergence, EDS, fibro, ADHD, possible autism. So yeah, we got a lot of spoonies in the comments who are here for all of us. Who would like to go next?
I'll go next.
Oh, go ahead, Casca.
There's two main things for me. One of them is pain, and one of them is mental. So with pain, I don't have a cutting table or anything. I've got like my little coffee table, which I can use to cut out very small things. But if I'm doing something quite large, then I have to be kneeling on the floor. So for that, my other half actually got me some big knee pads from a shop called The Range, and they're like gel filled and stuff, and they're supposed to be for builders, I think. And I found them really, really helpful. One thing which I've not found a solution to though is with my hands. My hands tend to hyperextend, my fingers do and stuff like that, and I get a lot of pain and cramping in my hands. So if I need to like hand do a seam or something like that, then I have a lot of trouble like actually keeping tension. Like even like pinning it to like my pants or something isn't great, because it's like I find it difficult to like hold the needle and stuff a lot of the time, because my hands are just like no, not having it. The other thing, like I say, is mental. It's motivation. I'll like often just be like kind of like sat on the couch and thinking, I'm gonna do it. It's like executive dysfunction. Like, I'm gonna do it. I need to get this done. I've got a video that needs to be out by Friday, so I need to get this done, and my brain's just won't let me do it. So I end up working a lot kind of last minute, with projects because of just trying to get this, like, get my brain to just let me do the thing.
We had a comment that say, mood, read large swaths of fabric and crawling on the floor. And someone else responded, I always seem to pull something when I cut on the floor. But yeah.
I'm the kind of person who can twist their ankle just by standing up. So
I feel that. I have a question for hyperextension, Casca. Have you looked into those rings that will stabilize your joints on your fingers to prevent hyperextension, the finger splints?
I do. I actually got some for free from my occupational therapist. I do find them useful for things like writing, but I tried them for sewing, and like once my fingers have started to ache quite a bit, I'll put them on. But I find them kind of cumbersome. I don't know if it's that because they're like NHS ones, they're a thicker plastic or something, but I just don't find them very comfortable for sewing with.
I'll show you ones my friend has. They're actually silver rings that are really beautiful. So.
Oh, okay.
But sorry, Ashley, you wanted to go next?
Sure. So I have similar issues. It's partly the getting the energy and the mental stamina to actually start getting to work on stuff. I have 2 kids, so I'm always trying to juggle like 42 different things at any given time. So just trying to get myself in the mindset to really work on a project and then be able to keep the steam up to finish it does get challenging at times. Cutting is a real pain in the butt, but I like to do what Rachel Maxey does, and it's just be a floor troll, is what she calls it. And the hypermobility kind of helps because I tend to contort myself in very odd positions to sit on the floor because I can't kneel. And I can't sit crisscross applesauce for too long either. So it's usually some kind of very odd contorted position of half laying across the floor. The standing and cutting sucks too. I just have not found a good way around it. I tend to cut multiple projects at one time just to be like, I'm done with it. And then it's out of the way. And then I avoid the machine as much as humanly possible. I really hate sitting at a machine. Sitting in a chair like a normal person is my nemesis and always has been. And I didn't know why I hated it so much until I finally got my EDS diagnosis. But being upright's hard. So I do a lot of hand sewing. Usually if I'm doing machines, it's like straight seams. I get the big major seams of the garment and everything is 100% hand finished because I can sit on a couch. I can have heat on my back. I can do it in whatever position is comfortable for as long as I want and then pick it up, take it down. The finger splints, I have those as well. I don't like them for sewing either. I have the plastic ones and I have dexterity issues kind of as is. So even using a thimble is hard for me. So I have like 4 different types of thimbles that I play with. And depending on what my fingers are doing, like I'll switch them up. But most of the time it's just, I can't even stand to use a thimble because then I don't have that sensation in my fingertips to even be able to figure out what I'm doing. So.
We had a comment of, what is it, Floor Troll represent, or Floor Troll Squad. So I think you're not alone. Rachel had to log off. She will hopefully be back shortly. I will mention all of the tools that we're talking about should be in the comments, or sorry, not in the comments, in the description below. I've linked back to my automatic rotary colors and Casca's knee pads and the tools that people are mentioning. I linked them down below. So feel free to have a look if you need something adaptive from the weird collection of things that we like. I also included all the ones from last year. So if you want to have the ultimate disabled sewing tools list, it is in the description. Rachel, did you want to go next?
Yes, and I will apologize. I'm having computer issues today, and I'm probably going to be in and out like that. My camera just crapped out in the middle of Ashley talking.
All good.
So I apologize in advance for that up and down situation. How my disability impacts my costuming is, like I said, because I work as a costumer. I have the good fortune to work with a team. And so the way that we delegate tasks and the way that we decide who's going to be responsible for what aspects of costume construction, there's things that I can't do. And my coworkers know that. And so we just figure out how to distribute the labor in such a way that I can contribute, but I'm not doing something that's too difficult for me with the RSI that I have. And in other ways, like, I have tinnitus. So when I'm working in the dye room with the ventilation hood on, I can't hear anyone speaking to me because the tinnitus just means all I hear is the ventilation roaring. And they know that you just you can stand at the door and go like this, and I know I need to come out there and hear what you're asking. They just know the types of things that we have to do as a team to accommodate what I can and can't do.
Yeah, it's awesome. You have a team that is actually understanding and willing to do that, and everybody should, but so few people do. We actually have one comment that says, one tool I found helpful for general hand pain is compression gloves. I can't wear them while sewing, but they're great to wear for when hands are achy. Those are awesome.
Can I just jump in there?
Yeah.
I've tried compression gloves, but my hands are so stupidly small that they didn't actually compress me at all.
We'll need to find kids ones that are small enough.
Yeah.
I have the opposite
I'm not
problem.
sure
My
if they
huge
do
man
for
hands.
child.
I really like the compression gloves. I got the fingertipless ones, so I don't have issues with sensation, but they really do help. And then I have a good hand brace that I'll use that covers up these thumb joints that like to go in directions they're not allowed to.
I feel that. All right, so the next one is, what time or schedule adaptations do you use to accommodate your disability in terms of planning a certain amount of time per day to rest, to sew, to do whatever, taking regular breaks, only working on high spoon days, etc. For me, I am very much a fly by the seat of my pants person. And so it's kind of, if I wake up that day and I don't feel up to it, I usually won't do something. I tend to do everything at once or not do it at all. But I'll also save little things like, sewing on buttons or doing, a quick mend or something for the low spoon days. So I always have something small and easy that I can finish quickly or do from bed, where I don't have to be sitting in front of a sewing machine all day. And that's mostly how I do it. Who would like to go next?
I tend to have a theoretical schedule for my projects. Rarely does anything ever happen by that schedule. I have 2 kids, so I'm constantly trying to balance household stuff, their stuff, my own physical issues. So kind of, I do a lot of sewing when the little guy's napping or after they go to bed, or if my husband happens to be home and he takes them away. When he takes them away, that's usually when I get the most done. Because I kind of like to go all or nothing too on a big project. I don't want to start doing the main construction of a garment and then just kind of leave it halfway. It's I need to at least get the body of it done all in one go. And so I will kind of split projects up. There might be a cutting day, a patterning day, and those, cutting fabric, the basic kind of rough fabric, and then actually patterning stuff out is probably going to be on 2 different days. Sometimes I draft my own patterns, so that can be a multi-day thing. But I'll break it down into things that kind of make sense. So building the body one day, and then for low spoon days, it's felling seams and finishing, and sometimes just really putting things off or saying, screw this project, I have no energy for it, and my brain is just not willing to think about this thing right now and doing something else. So I'll have multiple projects. I kind of always have a random crochet project that I'll have in the background. And if I just can't bring myself to sew something, I'll do that, or I'll work on the 8,000 things that end up in the mending pile instead. But trying to stay productive with whatever amount of time I can.
Cool. Who'd like to go next?
I can hop in. Yeah, so I'm not like you guys. I have, I think 7 projects going right now because everything is in a different stage. So if I feel like hand sewing that day, I have a project. Feel like cutting that day, which is never whoever wants to cut. I have, 2 projects probably because they're not cut. I have one that's in the middle of construction, one that's at the end of construction. So that's one thing I do is like, so if I'm not motivated, like I usually can find something to do because there's so many different stages. I think Sosteen talked about this in one of her videos, and I was like, I feel less bad about having like 17 projects. I think I have 7 right now. I counted them. So as far as I try to block out 2 to 3 hours when I'm machine sewing. I try to block out 2 to 3 hours in my calendar just to machine sew. Usually it's at night because that's just when I have the time and I just want to collapse in bed after that. I'll only sew on like mid to high spoons days. Machine sewing, I should say. Hand sewing I can do, especially if it's just something like felling a seam or hemming a dress. That's a pretty low spoon activity. And then my other rule is if you're sewing, again, this is typically machine sewing is my biggest trigger, and I'm in pain and I stretch and I take a break and the pain's not going away, you stop. Like, it's not worth it. It's not worth the flare up. It's not worth being in pain for the next week. It's not worth it. I don't care what deadline you have. Don't care. Stop. So, because again, it's a pretty big, and you have to be really aware of your body. I'm sure every disabled person ever will be like, listen to your body. That's the number one tip. That's just life. But the other thing I do is I'm a big fan of my timer to stop me from getting sucked in. Or another thing that's great, if you watch YouTube or TV, like every 20 minutes, you got to take a break. Mine's 20 minutes. Yours might be 15. Yours might be 30. I take a break. I stretch. Those stretches are going to look different for everyone. We have time. I'll go over some of mine. Yeah, I drink water. If you can get up and go to if you are able to walking around's great. If you can go to the bathroom, eat something, and coffee doesn't always count as water. Drink actual water too. I'm not a coffee drinker, but I know a lot of people are guilty of that. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the timer. Just, you got to stop and you got to stretch. You got to get up, do something else. Like, get your body out of that position. For me personally, like being in one position, that is fibromyalgia's worst enemy to me. So I'm just a big fan of stopping and taking a break. And again, if it's hurting and it's not getting better, no, stop, take a shower. Mine is taking a shower. That really helps my pain. Maybe it will be a heating pad. I also love that. So, but yeah, stop. If it's feeling bad, not worth it. Also, one thing I forgot to mention is finger nerve pain is a new thing. Don't know how to deal with that yet. So maybe the compression gloves I'll have to look into. But yeah, my finger is just nerve pain all the time now. And I'm like, what's wrong with you? But yeah, those are my things. It's just really use that timer app on your phone or whatever TV show you're watching. If it's 20 minutes, perfect time to take a break.
There's a great conversation happening in the chat where people are talking about their own issues and other people are recommending adaptations and things for each other. And I'm here for it. And it's wonderful. There was a comment that says, I have slip discs in my bottom lumbar, top 2 tailbone discs. So sitting for a long time period hurts. Oh, I am ouchy just hearing that. And it says, Fallon, depending which fingers, you may need to look to see if it's an ulnar nerve issue. Great.
I do have that. I do flossing activities. So maybe it's that.
They're talking about nerve flossing in the chat. And I'm like,
I do this thing. My other tip
is out of place. It will cause shooting pain all the way down into
numbness.
I get numbness out, and then my fingers go numb.
They were talking about nerve flossing, and I'm like, that cannot be what it sounds like.
No, it's basically a specific stretch that specifically works on the nerve, and kind of it's like basically making it more like fluid, if that makes any sense, because sometimes they can get kind of tight, and especially with fibromyalgia and hypermobility, things can get kind of wonky, and also they think fibromyalgia is a nervous system condition, so things just can get all garbled in your body sometimes. So you got to floss it to, which I do this. I just kind of put out my art. Oh, wow, I'm hyperextending. Should do that. I just kind of
flex
help
the
with
hand
that.
and kind of do one
Yeah,
of
you gotta.
those.
Yeah, exactly. You know the move. So yeah, maybe I need to do more nerve flossing. But yeah, just yeah.
Okay, so first off, I'm going to give it to the people in the chat to find like a child-sized pair of compression gloves and leave it in the chat for Casca. And, sorry, while everyone is Googling, who wanted to go next?
I'll go next.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I will go next then. However, remind me of the question. Sorry.
What time/scheduling adaptations do you use to accommodate your disability? Like
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I want to echo what Fallon just recommended with timers and say that I actually set up a shortcut on my watch to be a permanent 10-minute timer I can just set. And then my watch will let me know when I'm done. 10 minutes is kind of a good time for me to be doing anything, really. Like when 10 minutes goes off, when the timer goes off, then I can just take the temperature of what's going on and decide like whether I need to stop or whether I need to take a break and return to it or whatever. So I definitely use that. And I use a lot of scheduling apps in my phone as well. But I have really gotten, because I work with a team and have lots of assistants really, and I'm in a position to be able to delegate stuff. I've gotten really good at breaking apart a project and deciding like what is something that no one else but me can do and what can I hand off to people and what are the strengths of those people, because like for a while I had an assistant who was such a fast and deft hand sewer that I was just like, she's doing all the hand sewing, like someone else is doing all the hand sewing unless there's literally no one else in the building that can do it, and it has to get done because I'm so slow and it's so hard for me. But finding an assistant who was a very quick hand sewer was like, excellent.
Cool. Casca, do you want to go next?
Yeah, one of the major things for me is because I get quite bad fibro fog. I very nearly said fibro frog then. I have literally got a tattoo of like a frog with a little fibromyalgia butterfly because of the amount of times I say fibro frog instead of fibro fog. But it means that generally in the mornings, I'm not 100% there. So it's very much a safety issue for me. When I've like had a project that I've wanted to get stuck into and I've started it in the morning, like 9 times out of 10 when that's been the situation, I've ended up injuring myself in some way because my brain's just not engaging. I've still got a scar on my thumb from when I just basically touched the iron because I wasn't thinking. So I have to start in the afternoon, like after I've eaten something and I've let my kind of brain adjust to the whole being awake thing. The other thing I've got is I will listen to music while I'm sewing. I will get very, very absorbed. I get almost excited, like I want to do the projects and I'm excited about this thing and I want to see it done and stuff like that, but then I'm not really paying attention to my body. So the way I've kind of figured it out is that if I've listened to an entire album, then I need to stop and take a break. Because I know that I'm not going to look at like the clock or anything like that while I'm sewing. So that's the best way for me to figure it. I have also got a million alarms for various things set on my phone because I will also forget things like taking meds. So I've got alarms set for when I've got to take different meds and stuff like that as well.
There are whole apps for taking meds that I highly recommend because I'm the same. I'm like, why do I feel like garbage today? I've taken no painkillers today. Well, I'm dumb. Also, someone said that the fibro mascot should be a frog, like zebras for EDS. So they're saying it's an awesome tattoo, and that needs to be the new fibro mascot, which I'm here for. The fibro frog. Ah, see, I did it. Did the wrong one. Fibro frog. Yes. Next question is, what space or room adaptations do you use to accommodate your disability? So how have you made your room or the sewing space or spaces that you use work for you? I have an ergonomic chair and it has a detachable footrest on it. And oh, it's so good, y'all. And it has wheels, so I can like wheel around with my legs. And they attach to any wheelie desk chair, and you can get them and they're like padded and they kind of like, well, not rotate, but just, adjust to whatever angle your legs are at. And oh my God, it is my favorite thing in the whole world. I love it to pieces, and I can just put my legs up whenever I'm not using the sewing machine. And that for me is a huge, huge pain reliever to not have my feet on, well, my one foot on the ground all the time, and helps with the inflammation a lot. And I don't think I linked to that one down below. I'll find it and I'll link it. Alrighty. Who wants to go next?
I can hop in. Yeah, so as I've talked about, these are pretty new things for me, and I have very limited space and money, so I should probably have adapted my sewing space more than I have. I'll put that out there. So one thing I have is I have this really cool lamp that you can adjust the warmth of the light. One thing I didn't mention, I have chronic headaches and migraines. A lot of people with Ehlers-Danlos, but also fibromyalgia. Everyone who has a disability probably has chronic headaches. So when you need the light, but you don't want your like eyeballs to be like fried and you have to lay down for the rest of the day because you like are in excruciating pain from migraine, that is incredible. You can also adjust how bright or how dark it is. That is a lifesaver for, and also any type of crafting. I highly recommend a lamp that you can adjust. And then I have, this is linked down below. I have one of these bad boys, these like cardboard things. I put this on top of my twin size bed. It's about the size of a twin size bed. So it's like a makeshift cutting table. I personally, unlike some people here, do like to stand up while I do everything really, but while I cut stuff out. So I clear off my bed, and my bedroom is a sewing studio for a day or so. You can't sleep in it. So that's something I use. I don't have a special chair. Also, I'm on my like weird fidget chair right now, so that's why I'm moving. I have a thing called you switch the chair out every hour. So I rotate my chairs. I have like 3. And, every hour I'm like, okay, new chair time. And I do try to, adjust them to the correct height to have them as ergonomic as possible. Every like, basically every like desk thing you've seen of like the angles that you're supposed to be at, it should be the same for sewing. According to your disability, that's not possible for some people, but for me personally, having it as close to the ergonomic desk position is what's good for me. So whether that means a footrest, whether that means lowering the chair or propping up whatever you're working on, on something, whatever that means, as many right angles as possible, essentially. And trying not to slouch, but I think with crafting, it's impossible not to slouch because you just want to look at it closer. One thing that I really want to mention for cosplay is there's a lot of painting, a lot of nasty glues. Please use good ventilation or a mask or something, because I know people with POTS. I don't have POTS, but I have blood pressure issues, and smells can make me faint or have migraines. Go outside, open a window, use a fan, get a mask. Please, because cosplay uses a lot of nasty glues and paints. So that's something I really want to take from cosplay, because I think most of these are kind of the same. Cosplay crafting is very similar to sewing, but yeah, please get a new ventilation. I don't really know if this is the best space to talk about this, but also I have so much physical therapy equipment, but my favorite thing ever is this TheraCane, also called a climber's cane, linked down below. If you have back pain, this is the best $20 you will ever spend. I will say though, if you are prone to bruising like me, because of my delicate skin, you can bruise yourself. So be careful. But this thing is Godsend. It's $20. You don't have to get Theracane. You can get a climber's cane. It's linked below. Best thing ever. I also have just a normal, very cheap foam roller. Again, this will not be possible for everyone because you might not be able to lay down, but I think most people can use depending on your strength. But this, basically, you don't have to have a lot of strength to use because the ankle does it for you. This you might have to lay on the ground for, or you might be able to use it on the thing. Also, you'll notice that I'm like constantly like stretching my neck during this. So I'm constantly stretching, like constantly, even sitting here for like half an hour, I'm like, must stretch neck. So yeah, I just, whatever works for you the rest of the time. Because honestly, the stuff I use for being a student and studying all the time is the same things I use for sewing. So whatever works for you in your normal life for disability, see how you can translate that to crafting, because it's probably similar. It's probably not all that different.
There's some fun comments on this one. It says the fidget chair is incredible, and someone mentioned in terms
I will send it to you so you can link it. It's a round stool.
The light is also linked below. I have one too, and I love it. Someone mentioned asthma is also triggered by a lot of the solvents and paints and stuff, which I hadn't thought of, but yeah, it's completely legitimate.
100%.
I love this comment. My main adaptation is my space that I have to tidy as little as possible without living in a mess, because 99% of my sewing is done in hyperfocus, and I will not stop until I crash.
Oh yeah, my room used to be a hellscape. Probably was not safe for someone with mobility issues. It's finally to the place where I could walk through it, and everyone else would probably say it's disgusting, but to me it's spotless. So the cleaning is huge.
And then the comment to Casca, safety issue, it says, oof, safety issues, what a mood. I always have to think twice about whether it's safe to pick up a sharp object. Plenty of accidents while cooking, etc. So yeah, feel that one. Who wanted to go next?
I can go next.
Sure.
Mine's probably going to be quite short because I'm kind of naughty and I don't really do much. Like, I haven't got that many things. I've got my knee pads when I'm like kneeling down and stuff like that. One thing that I do have is things that have got thicker handles. I find that that's a lot easier to work with. So like I've not got it to hand right now. I should have thought ahead and brought it, but my seam ripper, I basically just put a load of gaffer tape around it until it was really, really thick. And crochet hooks and stuff like that as well. They've got like a little handle that like comes off and you can change it for the different sizes, and it's really, really thick. I find that helps with my hands a lot. The only other things really are making sure that I've got things to hand because something in the early days of like my sewing projects and stuff I used to end up doing a lot was having to reach for things, and the more you do it, the more it ends up doing your back in and stuff like that. So making sure that the things that I need for a project are close to me from the start, so I'm not having to go searching for stuff. And I do actually have one of those little grabby, like the things with the long handles and the grabby bit at the end for just like ripping some fabric over and stuff like that.
I 100% use my cane for that. It was just like it has the hook on the end, so I will like use my cane to grab things. Were there any other comments on that one? Oh yeah, it says for those who can afford it, Furl's crochet hooks are ergonomic styled and fantastic to work with, and they have 2 pride color lines. Yes, it's one of the nice things about sewing and crocheting and most fiber arts being stereotypically an old person's craft is there's a lot more adaptive tools for the elderly that us spoonies can benefit from as well. So I found a lot of cool tools that exist for elderly crafters designed for elderly crafters that work perfectly well for us. All right.
I've still not found anything for knitting that can help with that, because I love the look of knitting, but I just can't really do it because my hands are in just way too much pain. I can manage like 2 rows and then I'm done.
Need to get you a knitting machine.
They are very expensive from what I've heard.
They're a bit expensive.
There's also loom knitting, like the
loom. Yeah, that's true. I will also throw it to the commenters to see if there are any knitting adaptations that you are aware of. All right, who wants to go next?
I'll go. I have the blessing and the curse of not actually having my own sewing space. There are many areas of my house that hold my junk. Um, but yeah, my husband got the office in the house for his den of doom. But I don't have my own space. And so it becomes hazardous because I got a 2-year-old and I got a cat. So I have to be very meticulous with all my little needles to make sure they don't end up in anybody's foot. One ended up in the toddler's foot last night. So I was not as careful as I should have been. And thankfully he was okay. He didn't even bleed. So he was okay. But he was just like, ow, mommy, ow, 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 eh. And I'm like, I thought he hurt his finger, but no, there was a needle stuck in his foot. So have to be super careful with that. So I hate that in a way because I can't just leave something to sit. So I kind of have to do this all or nothing. Either I do kind of all these big hazardous projects in one go so I can get it, clean it up, get it out of the way. Or I tend not to do anything that has to involve doing that. So it does have issues, but because of that, I'm also able to easily move where I'm working because I don't have one area that I'm confined to. So I might be oftentimes I'm in my comfy, used to be recliner, but is now broken, and I have to use an ottoman chair, my living room. And that'll be my sewing area. So I'll have a basket, that'll have my current project or whatever. But my desk is also shared with my daughter. So it's like a homework space and a sewing space. It's a huge desk, so it kind of works. But it would be easier to adapt something if I had a specific place to adapt.
All right, and Rachel?
Yeah. So I want to give a shout out to that cane that Fallon showed. We have one in the costume shop where I work. Like, that thing really works. It's fantastic. And in terms of how the space has been adapted, like I said, it's a workspace that I share with a lot of other staff. And I guess the main thing that I've been instrumental in bringing about is changing the light bulbs in, from the institutional lighting to just be better light for me, but for everyone, that instead of these fluorescent tubes and stuff, it's just now easier to work in those lights. There are some accommodations that were built into the space predating me getting hired to work there. Like all of the floors are sprung floors, so you can stand and cut. We have cutting tables and most of the staff stands to cut. But because of the sprung floors, it's easier on your back. It's like the compression mats or the foam cushioned mats that help with that. But it's built into the architecture of the building, like that's in the floor, which I'm grateful for because I am also a fan of standing to do as much as I possibly can. I know there's like two schools here. I want to not stand as much as possible versus I'd like to stand as much as possible. So I personally have also moved my sewing machine off of the table, my domestic sewing machine. Of course, an industrial machine is like in a big table and stuff, but the domestic machine that I use for making hats, I've moved so that I can use it while I'm standing, because I just feel better doing it that way. It's easier on me to be able to walk up and use the machine and walk away than to have to sit down all the time. So, but that's about all that I can add.
So the next one is one of my favorite. Of what tools do you use? So actual like sewing tools that you have found to make it easier to sew with your disability. My favorite, and I've talked about this a million times, is my electric, like industrial level rotary cutter. And it is wonderful because I've cut through 6 layers of felt or 20 layers of stretch velvet at once. And oh, it is glorious. And you don't have to, once you turn it on, you don't have to grip it. You can just like slowly guide it around the fabric, and it's really fast. I'm sure Rachel's used these if she's working in commercial sewing. But yeah, you can, they're so great. I got mine for like $80. So if you look for like a slightly used pair, they're not a huge investment. But for me, not having to stand up, or if I stand up, I only have to stand up for 5 minutes because I can cut out an entire coat out of wool in 5 minutes. Makes a massive difference for me. I don't have the hand or arm pain, but it would be great for that too because you don't need to grip a rotary cutter and you don't need to keep using the scissors. But that's by far my favorite. And I do use a rotary cutter, but I have the angled one, the ergonomic one that's curved. And I found that's way easier to use because you don't need anywhere near as much pressure. I think that's it for mine. Who wanted to go next?
The best tool I have found, I got the suggestion from V from Miss Snappy Dragon. She was suggesting a sewing clamp or a sewing bird. So I found kind of a Victorian reproduction sewing bird that's got a little pin cushion in it. I can't find it right now. I hid it before I went to Ireland, so my son wouldn't take it, and I can't find it. But it's so cool. Like it helps with the tension issue. Instead of me trying to hyperextend my fingers in weird ways to do hems and straight seams, I can like double my time hand sewing a seam with that clamp. So it's absolutely my favorite thing ever. If you have any kind of hand issues, a sewing clamp or sewing bird is the best. And then leather thimbles is something I had recommended because the traditional thimbles with dexterity issues is just really difficult to try and manipulate. My fingers swell and shrink throughout the day at various times. So trying to keep something on a finger is a pain in the butt. But I got a set of 3 different types of leather thimbles to try out. And I like the fact that I can kind of interchange them. The one I like best is it's like a leather strip and then it's got kind of an elastic strap. So it'll cover my whole finger, but I have full flexibility of my hand. So that is nice. And then the other one is it's like a ring out of leather. And that one's kind of like, I'll use that too. And yeah, I think it was just those. Actually, it was 2 that was in there. But yeah, the leather thimbles are a lot better than metal.
And there are links to everything we're talking about below. So if you want to go shopping, including the sewing bird is a holdover for last year. Everyone recommends the sewing bird and they're amazing. All right, who wants to go next?
I'm a huge thimble collecting geek. Like I probably have 20 thimbles, and those leather ones are fantastic. I also have plastic ones, rubber ones. I saw a video of spotlighting some traditional shibori artisans in Japan who had made their own thimbles out of tiny coins that were tied into fabric around their fingers. And I was like, that's fantastic. And the best one that I have is not really a thimble. It's called a sailor's palm. And it is like a thimble for the ball of your thumb so that you can jam a really long, heavy needle through something, which I mean, I'm sometimes sewing like mascot heads or something. And it's like a sling or like a fingerless glove or something, but it's the thimble, the pitted sort of metal plate of the thimble is over the ball of your thumb. And I use that a lot. It's also just kind of fun to wear.
You can look like Iron Man. Just all right. I have a silicone thimble I use actually for when I'm hand sewing because I'll have the metal thimble here and the silicone one helps me just pull through so I'm not wearing down the side of my finger. So if you're using really thick fabric, you can just kind of yank it through without needing to worry about your finger so much. Alrighty, so who wanted to go next?
I can pop in. I have a very short section because, as Casca said through last section, very naughty. Don't have a lot of adaptation yet. But yeah, the main thing I found is the leather thimble. One thing I will say, if you have little delicate EDS skin, it's not going to get torn up anymore because it's protecting you. So that's I think like every historical YouTuber is like, use a thimble. And I was like, okay. And then I was like, wait, this is so good if you have baby skin. And get one that fits you. And also the nice thing with the leather ones is they really form to your finger. So that's really nice. I forget it's on my hand. Like I just go about my day with my thimble on. The other thing I think I forgot to mention in the last section was just a nice soft wrist brace is so great just for crawling around the floor. Whenever you're in pain, just use that wrist brace. Also, I guess something I wanted to mention, I don't know if this would be a last or a, but don't feel bad about using painkillers. I have this like weird thing where I don't want to like pop an ibuprofen. Actually, I don't use painkillers. I don't use ibuprofen. I use acetaminophen or Tylenol. Don't feel bad about it. Like sometimes I like beat myself up because I really developed more significant chronic pain about 2 years ago, and I feel terrible about like taking like my prescription medication. That's just so I can function. But don't feel bad. You know, as I said earlier, like stop if you like are really in pain, but like afterwards, like, or, you know, even during, like, don't feel bad about it. Use the meds that are literally for you.
Someone was
Don't be a
mentioning.
hero.
Sorry?
Don't be a hero. Don't be a hero.
Oh,
Take your
good.
drinks and take
Yeah.
them off.
You don't get a gold medal for suffering. Like, you just, the only person's life you make harder is yours, and no one will know or care. And be like, take painkillers. I have like 3 bottles of painkillers within arm's reach right now. Someone said, I found silicone thimbles to be too thin and my fingers sweat in them. Yes, silicone thimbles, you will sweat a lot because they are super not breathable, but I like them because they're soft and squishy. But a lot of people have textural things too, so you know, find the one that works best for you. And leather ones do absorb a lot of moisture, which is may or may not be great depending on who you are. I sweat a lot, so I don't know if I'd want that. Did we get through everybody? I can't remember which order we went.
I haven't been yet.
Okay.
Mine's going to be kind of short though, because I actually already mentioned some of them. So yeah, having things with ergonomic handles, that's a really big help. I don't actually use a thimble because, again, the tiny hand problem. I've not managed to find one that actually fits me. But there was actually something that I only started using recently because I only realised what it was recently on my sewing machine. My sewing machine has got an automatic needle threader. And I spent ages like trying, like fiddling and stuff like that, like trying to thread a needle. And you just push a thing down and flip it and it does it automatically. So yeah, that's been really, really helpful for me.
Yeah, I have a friend who's visually impaired, and she says that was a huge boon for her being able to sew with a visual impairment, as well as not having a digital sewing machine, one that has the dials that like chunk, 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 because then you can actually feel, you have a tactile knowledge of what you're on, and you can even put little braille stickers on each of the stitches so you know where you're at on those. So yeah, the drop-in bobbins too are so much easier. Um, Alrighty, so the next question is, what do you find is the biggest obstacle in your costuming? For me, it's been far more related to going out, going to events, everything. Things are just not accessible. Almost everybody does well, we put in a ramp, so we're done. And it's like, there are lots of disabilities that aren't wheelchair users. And even wheelchair users, the majority of wheelchair users are not are partially ambulatory. They can walk sometimes, so they will need other adaptations. And I went to an event recently and they had a map of the exact area with distances between the front door and the activity area, and says there is a small lip of the door right here. There is a 90-degree curve to get into the washroom here. And I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. this is exactly what I wanted. And then for each event, they had sensory information. There may be strobing lights. There will be ambient music for this event. There will be loud music for this event. There will be dancing. For one of them, it was the lighting is going to be, it's mostly in the dark with like low ambient lighting. Another one would be, it's like party lighting. And even in terms of like scents, it's like there will be food served here, so that will have, and they just thought about everything in terms of what anyone might need. They had reserved seating for people with disabilities, inside the hall, outside the hall while you were waiting, and that was phenomenal. But every other place I've been, I remember calling a place a few days ago and said, "Hey, I would like to go to this botanical garden. Do you have something like a scooter I could use?" And they're like, "Oh, we have wheelchairs." I'm like, "Okay, are they kind of wheelchairs that I can push myself?" "No, you'd have to have someone push you." I'm like, "Do you have someone available who could push me?" They're like, "No, you would have to bring someone." I'm like, so, like, well, we have a senior shuttle on Thursdays. I'm like, okay, so if I'm not a senior, so I'm not eligible, but once I arrive there, then what? Like, well, you can bring an able-bodied person. I'm like, that's not a solution. So yeah, getting out to events where they actually take into account that I can't stand and do a fashion show. I can't walk through a massive historical site or go to a dance all night, that I need to be seated on my butt 90% of the time, and I can't do a 6, 8, 10, 12 hour event. So that's been mine. I saw a lot of nodding there. All right, who would like to go next?
I'll chime in off of that. Getting to events is a challenge. With the SCA, a lot of our stuff is outdoors. And it's 50-50 whether it's ADA accessible, let alone realistically accessible. And I live in southern Texas, so it is a swamp hell most of the year. And I have heat intolerance. So even just figuring out in terms of material what to make something out of to be able to wear it, is kind of its own thing. Thankfully, linen is a historically used fabric, and it is the best fabric, in my opinion, for, distributing sweat and keeping your body comfortable. So, pretty much everybody in the South, if something would have been historically done with wool, we do it with linen because we will die. Even with lightweight summer tropical wool, it's still, that's like winter wear here. That's not what you wear in any of the summer months. But getting to things is hard, and it can be discouraging because you can make all these amazing, gorgeous outfits, and then you're like, crap, I'm never going to actually get to wear this. What's the point in finishing it? Like, you're like, oh, you have a bad pain flare, and maybe you missed the deadline for that event that you wanted to wear it to. And yeah, you get very discouraged because you're like, crap, I missed the event that I was going to wear it to. When am I going to wear this? And, you chuck it aside for 6 months to a year. So I totally emphasize with the getting to events is just a pain in the butt. And that is a big deterrent. And it's hard, and just kind of keeping the momentum and the energy to stick to a schedule to get something done, to be able to wear it to a thing, that's probably one of my biggest struggles, is being able to stick to any kind of realistic schedule to get it done in time to wear.
Someone in the comments was mentioning that their city removed most of the benches, and I've been noticing that too. And it's their anti-homeless measures, which, let's start off of, that's awful. These people are human beings and deserve to sit down, for the love of God. Let them sit somewhere. And all human beings deserve to sit. But in addition to that being a horrible thing, and don't do that, a lot of us need to sit more often than everyone else. There should be seating readily available. And the worst is, you go like by a building and they have this big like concrete ledge that's like 50 feet long. It says, "Do not sit." I'm like, then put a bench. Like, put something down for me to sit on, because I'm sitting on your wall. I'm sorry. You need to deal with it. Put seating up.
Or they've covered it with little spikes
Oh.
to deter you from sitting, or to deter birds from sitting there and pooping or whatever.
Yeah, I think they call it hostile architecture when something is designed specifically
Yeah.
to deter people away. I know my city put in this sculpture that was all these metal fish, because it's like a salmon run, and metal fish on metal spikes that were dug into the concrete underneath a bridge as a art installation. But it was 1,000, and they're spaced just far enough apart that you can't sleep there, and that's the only reason they put it up. And hostile architecture, I think it's called. Someone said a few weeks ago, I went to my first festival or fair with my wheelchair. I had plenty of times before, and not going to lie, it went better than I expected. That is awesome. But said festival is very accessible for festival standards. Yeah. And that's something, if you are able bodied, that is the best way you can be an ally, is ask those questions when you're registering, is what are your accessibility things? Because then they're like, oh, well, something we talked about a lot last year. They're like, well, we don't have any accessibility stuff because disabled people don't come to our events. And I'm like, nope, you have that wrong. Switch that. Disabled people don't come to your events because you're not accessible. So if you are able bodied and you're going, ask those questions, because if they get them a lot, they'll start thinking about it. If it's just the one random disabled person who's asking and they never get a yes, or they're like, well, we might be able to do something when you get here, they're going to stop calling. They're going to stop asking those questions, and it'll just stay the way it is forever. Yeah, no seating in malls between stores, and hostile architecture in Toronto is terrible. Yeah. Yep, it is awful. Stop doing that. People deserve to sit down. I don't care who they are. Who would like to go next?
I can go next. And also, I just wanted to jump on that as well, because they've got that kind of stuff in my town as well, and it's a disabled, like, yeah, it's a retirement town, and it's like there's people who, like, the average age of people like in this town is like 70. People need to sit down. Like, what are you doing? But yeah, the main obstacle for me is my own head. I find that I get in my own way a lot. Like I said at the beginning, I've got a host of mental health stuff going on. So one major difficulty that I have at the moment is with being able to go to a fabric shop. I'm terrified when it comes to traveling for numerous reasons. So I've ended up with getting fabric that's completely wrong for a project because I wasn't able to actually look at it and feel it. It's just been a waste of money, pretty much. I recently was able to actually get to a fabric shop, like, with the help of a friend, and I was so proud of myself. I managed to actually do it. And it made such a difference being able to actually go to a place and pick out fabric. And it's also in other ways as well, with like I've said before, I get excited about things. I get really, really excited about things. But then I'm not actually thinking about my physical health needs. So I'll go like 8 hours without drinking anything and stuff like that. Like, just completely forget things because I just get so like absorbed in what I'm doing, and like I'll have been kneeling down for like ages and ages and ages doing a project, and then I'll be wondering, why is my back absolutely killing me now? It's like, oh yeah, it's because you forgot to actually stand up for a couple of minutes. So yeah, that's my biggest obstacle. It's me.
Right, who'd like to go next?
Yeah, I can go next. So I touched on this earlier. My biggest obstacle is just that fatigue. You know, I think most disabled people, all disabled people, but particularly people with chronic fatigue syndrome, you know what it's like to never really feel rested. You know, I always describe it as, it's like I constantly am coming home from a hike and sleeping doesn't help. It feels like I just went on a really big, huge workout and I can't rest from it. It's just like I'm constantly tired. And I'm really glad you guys, because I was thinking it isn't part of just sitting down at the sewing machine or, you know, even picking up a needle and thread to hand sew. But, you know, conventions, you know, are obviously more of a cosplay thing. And those are just so exhausting. Even if I had every seating in the world, even if I had my, because I use a cane sometimes, even if I had my mobility aids, even if I had everything, just the sheer being at a convention, sometimes there are 4 days in a row typically. You know, and I haven't gone to a convention in a very long time. And when I did go, it was before I really had any of these issues. I'm scared. I'm going to a Renaissance fair next month, and I know I'm probably going to lay in bed for 3 days. And, you know, that's not possible if you have a job. I knew that it was the first weekend of school and I probably won't have any assignments coming up. So it's really just fatigue. Fatigue is really one of, just in my life in general, I'd say, like, people are like, oh, your pain, your tummy issues. No, it's just the fatigue is a real killer. And being able to rest, and, like, you know, if I did go back to conventions, I'd probably have to take a nap in the middle of the day, you know, and I know that's not possible. Like SCA, I mean, I don't know how SCA works, but, you know, in these, you know, events where you don't have a hotel right there, that's not really possible. So I'm really glad you guys brought up that. But yeah, just fatigue in both actually making the costume and then actually, or even a photo shoot. A photo shoot will tire me out for the rest of the day. I did, you know, because cosplay is super uncomfortable, unlike historical wear. You're wearing crazy heels. You're typically in, like, I have like full plastic outfits. Wigs are terrible. You're overheating. So yeah, wearing it and making it both, just really just no more spoons at the end of the day. Zero, negative.
All right. And
so I'm
Rachel?
last.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've mentioned that my coworkers are very accommodating and understanding and proactive about trying to figure out how to make things work where I can be a part of the team functionally. And I would say it gets more challenging the more you expand the sphere to the rest of the theater. You know, the other departments, backstage, production departments, and artistic, and people in other areas of the theater. I think because I don't have visible disabilities, they don't work with me on a regular basis and observe the things that we need to do to accommodate what I can and can't handle. That sometimes it's not malicious, it's just an ignorance or a thoughtlessness or you know, that I will come up against obstacles that I didn't expect from people who had no idea they were putting an obstacle in front of me. You know, or just misunderstandings of like just the other day, someone from the administrative area came to talk to me in the dye shop while the ventilation was on, at which, as I've mentioned, I have tinnitus. I could not hear a word she said. And I was like, I know I'd look rude right now, but I don't know what you're saying. And I guess if there's fallout from this, that'll happen. But I do want to say, on the topic of going to events and the kinds of physical things that there are to overcome, that I have been, one of the things I've been so grateful about with respect to the unfortunate but yet positive outcome of COVID is how many events have moved to digital delivery. Like COSI, the costume symposium that we're involved in, is a prime example, but all of the professional conferences in theatrical costuming and costuming for performance have moved online. And I have always been unable to attend most of those, either because of accessibility or because of financial limitations, not being able to travel to whatever place they were being held at, or not having the excess of money that you apparently need to go to a conference. You know, that the way that suddenly a lot of these events became so much more accessible, and that I saw so many more people representing populations that you otherwise never had participating, you know, not just disabled people, but parents and people of lower incomes who don't have the disposable income to attend. You know, it's just been like, these are the missing voices that have been gone from every other event. And now some of us are able to attend, and that's just been wonderful. Like, unfortunately, I don't see it moving forward as much as I would like into what is happening now. But boy, I've been grateful for that the past couple years.
Yeah, I agree completely. All these things, and I've been asking for this for years and years and years. It's like, hey, could you maybe not do it virtually, but have a virtual component, like have some of the classes available? No, we couldn't possibly. That would be so hard and take so. And then in a day, they changed it because suddenly able-bodied people needed it. Not that I'm bitter. Yeah, someone was saying, and now they're desperate to make everything unaccessible again for those very reasons. It's like, yeah. And being able to see theater digitally, go to conferences, go, you know, see all sorts of shows and music performances online. There are art galleries who did like a walking art tour, and they got one of those like 360-degree cameras and just had somebody slowly bike the whole thing. So it's like, oh my God, there's a walking art tour I can actually see. And that was amazing. And they got like people from all over the world engaging in their stuff, whereas previously it was only people from the local neighborhood. It's crazy. And if you are a person who runs this, please keep doing online offerings. Yes, you can go back to doing in-person things when it's safe to do so in your region, but don't eliminate the online offerings just because COVID is over. Because I mean, even once, I mean, COVID isn't over. If you think COVID's over, you're not paying attention. But um, just because you can doesn't mean that's what you should do. And there are plenty of people who are so immunocompromised because of COVID, they can't leave the house. I have friends who have not left their house in over 2 years because they're so immunocompromised that they can't risk. I mean, other than going to the hospital, even then, they're just, you know, draped head to toe to make sure they don't get anything. Um, but yeah, like we want to participate, and you don't even have to like make it all available for free. I'm happy to pay for a ticket if it means I can go and make, you know, there are people who are disabled who have money, and people who are disabled who don't have money, people who can attend in person who have money, and offer like sliding scale and community tickets for both in person and digital events, because it makes such a big difference, and it's a way to increase your attendance, which is great when you're doing reporting or asking for grants or getting funding, to say we had 5,000 people log in online for a 200-person event. Like, it's phenomenal. And it's also an accessibility thing. So please keep doing that. The, well, second to last question, I want to ask one more question after this, is what do you find is your greatest strength in costuming? For me, it's, oh God, it's basically cutting corners. Is, do I really need to put interfacing on this? No, I'm not going to put it. It's like, do I need 7 buttons or can I get away with 4? I'll do 4. And like finding ways to adapt stuff of, do I really need to hand sew this? Is there a way I can machine sew this? Because I'm the opposite of a lot of people. I will find a way to machine sew everything. I hate hand sewing, it drives me crazy. So it's like, this can take 2 minutes on a machine instead of 2 hours hand sewing. And so I find kind of what is necessary to make something and then discard everything else. It's like, oh, you need to have all these beautiful pin tucks. I'm like, okay, yeah, but I could just gather it and not do the pin tucks. And it's, you know, finding those little workarounds that will save you a ton of time and effort and spoons in order to get something that looks just as good or sometimes better than what you envision. It's like, oh, you need to fold all these little 1-inch pleats. And I'm like, so gathering stitch is what you're telling me. I'll do a gathering stitch. Because I'm not pressing 1-inch pleats all the way around a skirt, because ain't nobody got time for that. Who would like to go next?
I'm the opposite of you. I think the fact that I am so flippin' meticulous is a strength for me. Like, I'm a super type A detail orientated person, and like with anything in life, if I'm planning a vacation or planning an event, I'm going to look at all these stupid little minutia details and make sure all of them are covered. I don't care how the overall thing turns out, as long as the individual details were thought out and taken care of. So the fact that my brain allows me to kind of like hone in on these little itty bitty things, and like I'm willing to take the time to learn how to do 18 different things just to make a thing. Like I wanted to make a 14th century kirtle, so I learned how to draft to do it. I learned how to make buttons, like now I'm trying to figure out how to loose set my own cording, like all these different skills that like people will be like, I'll just buy this stuff, like just do it on a machine. And I'm like, oh, but I need to know, how much time does it take to do this in the historical way by hand? And so I think the fact that I'm willing to do that gives me a different, it makes it slightly different, and that is a skill for me, I think.
Yeah,
Sorry?
I can go next. Anyone else? Okay. Or sorry, did you want to say something, Melissa, from the chat?
I was just gonna, so yeah, something from the chat was, it's historically accurate to do less work than one needs to. Thank you for validating my laziness. I appreciate you.
Yeah, so I guess my greatest strength is also kind of historically accurate when you think about it, is using what you have or using what you find in the trash. So great, I actually have an example in front of me. I've been hoarding this coffee container for almost 2 years because I want to be the Morton Salt girl for Halloween, and I'm going to make a bigger version. And it was sitting on my bedroom floor, and my mom was like, why do you have this coffee container? I'm like, I have a vision for this, mother. And sometimes it's because I'm cheap. Sometimes it's because I'm lazy, because I don't want to go anywhere. Sometimes it's just because I think it's cool that you can make a lamp out of a peanut butter container. Like, sometimes I'm just like, oh yeah, that wasn't made entirely out of dollar store, ribbon. Or like, don't have interfacing? Do I have any fabric lying around that I can use? Like, that's historically, I don't remember, it was some YouTube video. Someone was like, the most historically accurate thing is using what you have, whether that means like dyeing something because you have some dye and you have some fabric. So like, why go out buy new fabric when you can dye it? So yeah, but yeah, the coffee container, stuff like this, I love using, or like make an arrow quiver out of a poster tube. That I love that about cosplay. It's my favorite thing about cosplay is just like going through the trash. I know, our Shield Maiden, I think her name is. She's a cosplayer. She's phenomenal. And she like makes like huge builds out of like $100, which even I haven't figured out how to do. So, and that win like awards. So it's definitely can be done. And again, it's historically accurate when you think of, and also like think about World War II. Like women literally looked around the house and they're like, how can we look pretty? And maybe that was like taking some flowers and gluing them on a hair clip, whatever that meant. So I think using unconventional materials that because of cheapness or laziness or creativity is my greatest strength.
Thank you for perfectly setting up my make, do, and mend video that I have coming out at 4 p.m. Pacific today. Like so please stay tuned for my make, do, and mend video where I talk about all the like making do with nothing and how to make underwear out of a Air Force escape map.
Exactly. I wish Melissa paid me to promote her video.
You can make a medieval veil out of a shirt you found on the side of the road too.
Exactly. Like the stuff that I saw from the Make Do Amend, it's like, want to make a wedding dress out of a parachute? I found like 4. They're amazing. Anyway, sorry. Digressing.
Were they silk? They were
Yeah.
silk, right?
Yeah, because nobody could get silk, and so a lot of
For
these
stockings.
a lot of these paratroopers would carry their reserve chute rather than just dumping it and going into battle. They would carry it with them if they were getting married and either ship it or take it back home to their fiance, who would make a dress out of, and it was a massive swath of white silk, and silk was not available. Like you could not buy it for love or money. And so there's all of these wedding dresses that exist that are made out of recycled or upcycled parachutes. But yeah, so super random stuff. And there was a make do amend booklet released by the Department of Information and the Board of Trade of how to care for parachute nylon. Weird world. Sorry, random aside. Who would like to go next?
I'll go. I think my biggest strength is probably the part of my brain that gets super excited about things. It's the same part of my brain that will like get distracted and like go, oh, squirrel, and stuff like that. Because that part of my brain where I'll just be sitting there and think, then just a random thought will just pop into my head, like, yeah, what if Starlight was around in like the Invicted Edwardian times? Like, and then I'm on a roller coaster and I'm excited and I'm like, oh, I've got this idea. Right, I need to do all my research. Exactly, like, how exactly can I mash these two things together that aren't really supposed to go together? And just working things out. Because it's that excitability which gives me the momentum that I need to actually come up with like some weird concepts of things that I can make. So yeah, I'd say that's probably my biggest strength, like just kind of getting very excitable about projects.
I definitely did not email the Imperial War Museum to try to get some original copies of documents for my video. That's not the thing I would do.
I spent ages researching the history of women wearing pants just because I wanted to make a video making some Victorian cycling bloomers, but in the style of 90s goth pants.
That's awesome. I'm so here for that. Rachel, you were last if you wanted to go.
Yes, I would say that my greatest strength is what I call workload Tetris. Like, I'm really good at breaking down a workload into little parts of what the separate jobs are and how long it'll take to do them and when they're due by and what needs to happen before something else can happen, and slotting all those blocks into the bigger construction to where when we get to opening night, nobody's naked.
Except those who are supposed to be.
Except those people who are supposed to be naked.
It's important distinction. All right, so I am going to open it up to questions from the audience, but because there's a bit of a delay in the time between us talking and it getting to the chat, I'm gonna throw another question out there just for funsies and see what happens. And that was, how would you say your different intersections have affected your disability, whether it's being or your experience as a person with a disability, whether it's, being queer, being neurodivergent, being BIPOC, whatever it is. One thing I found is that the queer communities are if they do events, they're far more accessible because it's something they tend to put a lot of, because it's like, oh, well, we should not oppress people. Great, let's do all this stuff. And they'll do stuff like shuttles and, reserved, like huge amounts of reserved seating or free tickets if you need to bring someone to help you out, or, oh, we'll have accessibility stuff for you can use if you need to borrow or rent a scooter, or, have earplugs or whatever it is you need to access the event. And I found that they are generally far more prepared and invested in making really accessible events.
Yeah, so just to clarify, so this is how intersectionalities affect costuming, or just affect everything, or
I think it's
or our disabilities?
Kind of where your disabilities and your intersections kind of meet, and if it has anything to do with your costuming or has made things better, worse, observations, just kind of, yeah.
Okay, I had a thought and then it left me, so I'm gonna come back to you.
For me, so because I am I'm Muslim and I cover all the time, that definitely does impact my costuming and what I do and how I do it. So I tend to gravitate more towards certain time periods that I can cover in a way that both fits my religious requirement and would be considered historically accurate. So it does kind of add a little bit of a different element, and it does kind of create challenges sometimes when I'm looking into especially more like vintage style fashions of trying to figure out, okay, how did people actually work these fashions? And at the same time, how would they cover? Like, would they do scarves in the same way that, you know, I might do it now? Or was there something that you would see more commonly? Would they adapt certain patterns maybe to increase length? Or were they wearing just opaque tights? So I tend to do a little bit more research into trying to figure out a way that is both accurate for the look and doesn't detract from the look, but also fits my own religious needs. And then in there, I have the dynamic of having to pay more attention to fabric because I have some kind of different texture sensitivities and heat intolerance. And I'm kind of intolerant to cold too. Generally, temperature extremes don't work well. So I do tend to pay more attention, especially in late, to fabric. So that if it's a style where you're going to have multiple layers, I can wear multiple layers and not pass out. And especially, you know, being in Texas, it's hot. We have a lot of like outdoor stuff that we do, and I want to have that full look. I don't want to have to like skimp on it because I'm like, oh, I'm just going to not wear as many clothes. I want to have the full look. So I do tend to pay a lot more attention to how things are layered, how they're going to go together. It adds a lot more components to my outfits because everything's got to have headgear to go with it. I can't just make a cool outfit and call it a day. I got to figure, okay, now what the heck's going to go on top of that cool outfit? So it adds more of an element. And just kind of mundanely, I think sometimes being a person with disabilities while also being overtly Muslim and then also being very white, it's a dynamic that confuses the crap out of a lot of people. And I feel like people just don't always know what to do with me when I go into any situation, like sometimes at SCA events, it's not very often in my local group, but you know, I'll get like the vibe, they're like, why is she here? And then, you know, you add in, if I'm in like the grocery store using a scooter or something, especially if I have little kids with me, people are like, oh, what is this immigrant doing on this scooter with her children? Is she just giving them a ride? So it's a weird dynamic. And I don't know, like it just adds certain aspects that I think if you're in one of those situations, you don't necessarily have it. Like airports are a nightmare for me. If I'm going through in a wheelchair, being Muslim and having a wheelchair is hell. This is the worst thing ever. It's like they're checking all my mobilities. They're going through my meds like in an extreme way. Like I've learned to pack things very strategically because I expect it to be checked. I expect to be held up. I know I'm going to have to take off braces. I know I'm going to have to take everything off. So it's like, just double the time, double my travel time. We're okay.
Yeah, I got my train of thought back, but yeah, you can say whatever you do.
I was just like, some of the things I've noticed of the you can only be one thing crowd of you can't be disabled and Muslim. You can't be disabled and queer. You can't be like, oh, what are you going to be next? Vegetarian? And I'm like, it's like that's not a thing. Or someone saying like, oh, disabled SWAT should only be around from 9 to 5, like because they shouldn't need them after 5 p.m. It's like, we're disabled, we're not werewolves. It's different. Sorry, Fallon, go right ahead with your
No, go ahead. I always like want to jump in. I'm like, no, you got to moderate and do your thing. Yes, I spent some. So I want to say one of the main reasons I formed, well, not one of the main reasons I'd say. So I have my Instagram. I was really just in the middle of the pandemic, had just gotten sick. And I was just like, I'm losing it. So I was like, I'm gonna start dressing the way I want to. And I think a part of the reason why I started my Instagram. But also, like, I didn't see that many Asians like wearing vintage. There's lots of white people. There's a growing number of Black women in particular who are really into pinup, who are incredible. But I didn't see that many Asians. So in the vintage sphere, and I really lucky to grow up in a very diverse area. I've always known tons of Filipino people and Asians, but I didn't really know anyone in the vintage sphere. So I think that's super important. And also, my grandparents immigrated from the Philippines. I have photos from my grandma in the Philippines in the 40s. She looks like every other woman. She has her hair done. She's wearing 40s. She's wearing the red lip. When she moved here, same thing. Like she was in the Philippines and she looked like basically every woman in the US. So it's before she moved here. So it's BS that, you know, like people like Westernization, for better or for worse, has traveled across the globe, and people in countries all around the world were wearing exactly what other people were wearing, even back to the 40s and before that too. So I think that's really important because, again, she had the same exact haircuts. So yeah, and I think what I found interesting is that like you don't think like dressing like traditionally feminine would help like signal that you're queer. Also, shout out to Winona Ryder on my wall. If you didn't think I was queer, there you go. I have the magazine over there. But anyway, but it's also kind of just, I didn't intend for it to be to signal that I'm queer, but I think it inadvertently does, especially with the super short like Jean Seberg haircut. And there's tons of queer and disabled people in the vintage community for whatever reason. You know, we just want to look really good because we don't feel good on the inside. Yeah, I think like Jessica Out of the Closet is like a super famous example, but there's tons of disabled people in the vintage community. So I think that's a really interesting intersection that I found, not just with me, but tons of other people. And also my grandfather, who I unfortunately never got to meet, was a tailor, and he was Filipino and one of the first business owners in his town. So it helps me feel more connected to that as well.
I'm Jessica Out of the Closet is disabled queer icon. She is the best. If you don't follow her, go follow her right now. So I do have some questions from the audience. First one is, for anyone who has a neurodivergency, do you find there's some colors that you try to avoid because it causes something like a low spoon day, or you find is a trigger for your disability? Someone responded, I can't do yellow. It gives me headaches for some reason. Casca, you're on mute.
It was bound to happen eventually. Some shades I don't really like. Like kind of mustardy yellow. Like if it's and kind of like a yellowy green. No, don't like them. Don't like them. Won't use them. I'll use like a bright yellow or a bright green or something like that, but I won't use like go into the kind of mustardy. Like no, and green. If as soon as you add green in there as well, then no, don't like it.
No chartreuse for you. We also had some comments of, I hate airports because of the metal detectors and body scanners and being held together by metal from accidents. I hear that so bad. I am 10% metal. I am mildly conflicted when I have to click the I am not a robot because I am technically 10% robot.
You're Wolverine.
Yeah, but I don't get claws. And if I got anything from Wolverine, I want the super healing ability. Like, let's be honest, wouldn't that be the first thing? You're like, screw every superpower in the world. I just want to be completely healed from everything immediately in 5 seconds. I'll trade every superpower in the world for that one. And then there was, have you come across interesting historical assistive devices and techniques used by disabled people in the past? I actually bought my cane because it was the most vintage looking. It's like wood with a engraved brass handle because it looks really cool and vintagey and would work for, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, maybe even 200 years ago. So that's purposely why I bought that, because most canes just look very medical and gross. Um, Jessica Out of the Closet has a really good video about that where she talks about how medical devices look way too medical. They look very sterile and they're ugly, and you just kind of feel ugly using them. And it's like, can someone make a pretty cane or a wheelchair that's not hideous? And so she got a mobility scooter that looks like a 1950s Vespa, and it's the coolest thing. I love it to pieces. So, mobility aid makers, if you're listening, please make us pretty things. Anyone else encounter something cool, historical, adaptive?
It's not historical, but my mother has a super cool cane as well. She has multiple sclerosis and is mobility impaired. Sometimes she uses a scooter, sometimes she uses a cane. And she uses a really cool cane. She found a super futuristic looking cane. Like when she got it, I thought it looked like something that should be on Babylon 5 because that was like the big sci-fi TV show at the time, and I was really into it. It's a square cross section piece of lucite that has been twisted, so it looks like a futuristic icicle. I mean, it's people comment on it all the time. Like the whole, she's had it since I was a small child. People are always like, wow, that's the coolest cane I've ever seen. And I don't know where she got it. And I've never seen another one like it. So I have no idea. But someone should make those, like mass produce those.
3D print it, easy.
I think canes are like the only mobility aid that historically has been pretty badass. I mean, sword canes, like.
I 100% researched that before getting my cane, and they're illegal in Canada. I'm like, no. So no, you can't order them. You can't take them over the border, which I get. Like, probably don't
I
want
think
random.
I can legally open carry any kind of weapon under the sun in Texas.
Yeah,
Like,
well, I mean,
I think it's totally legal to wander around with an unsheathed sword as well as an AK-47. Like,
I think you could have a 50 caliber machine gun mounted onto your
yeah,
vehicle.
the
if you
world is
want.
kind of your creepy oyster here. It's a strange land I live in.
It's your weaponized oyster. Someone mentioned a button hook, which is a really cool idea because, I mean, even if you're not wearing like shoes or a dress that requires it, it's a really great way to not have to fidget with those buttons. And yes, Morgan Donner made a video about the bustle chair, and it was kind of a joke. And yet, the first thing I thought, I'm like, as a disabled person, having a chair attached to my butt would be the best thing ever. That would be so much fun. Button hook. And yes, Victorians did have wheelchairs. They were mostly kind of like rattan chairs that had wheels on them. Unfortunately, a lot of them were designed for other people to push. They weren't the kind that you could push yourself, or they wouldn't have the double wheels that wheelchairs have. If you've never used a wheelchair, there's a wheel that goes on the ground and then a smaller wheel on the outside that you actually move. So you're not getting your hands filthy dirty from touching the wheel. So yeah, there were some, but there weren't a ton. Because a lot of people like us would have just died in history. So the technology wasn't there and the medical advancements weren't there. So yeah, canes and wheelchairs, there are some like prosthetics made out of wood or ivory that I've seen, but not much. George Washington's wooden teeth, maybe? I don't know. That's about all I can think of. Sorry, there was another question. Oh my God. I know you can get canes in the UK with a hidden glass flask to put whiskey or drink of your choice. And I found those ones too. Those were cool, but I worried it wouldn't be stable enough. But yeah, sword canes are just boss. There's
This isn't historical. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
This isn't historical, but for some crutches that I've got some, and they're really, really good, and they don't look like your kind of classic clinical crutches. Smart crutches. They've got a bit that you rest your forearm on, so you're not putting all of your weight on your hand, and you can adjust the angle of it. And mine are zebra print. Yeah, I've got some looks using them in the street. People seem to think they're really cool.
I was going to say that I will always regret that I lost an eBay auction because it was for a parasol that doubled as a cane, that the handle came out and had a stiletto. Like, it was like assistive yet personal protective device. And it was clearly like probably 1870s, 1880s era.
I need this.
It was like nothing I had ever seen, and I was just like, I have to have that. But the auction went up over like $300, and I was just like, I can't afford this. But I always remembered it because it was such a cool piece of equipment.
It's like the Victorian ladies who would like stab men with their hat pins if they were being groped in public. This is like one up. I'm gonna shove a knife in you. That would also be illegal in Canada, though. I just realized because concealed weapons are illegal across the board.
Not in
Which
Texas, though.
not in Texas.
I guess they could.
Ashley can 100% get a stiletto parasol cane. That sounds like the most baller prog band ever. Someone needs to make a band called Stiletto Parasol Cane.
If anybody would like to donate one to me, Chronically Muslim on Instagram.
Oh, that's the other thing I will mention. Everybody's Instagram and or YouTubes and or everything else are listed below. Please follow everybody. They're all amazing and make beautiful things and do amazing videos and photos and Instagrams and YouTubes for whoever is on one or the other or both. So please follow them, and please follow Violet and Isolde, who couldn't be here because they are dealing with very low spoons and are lovely humans who do beautiful things. Someone mentioned about the Victorian wheelchairs, said yes, they were for moneyed people to be pushed around by the help. And I mean, not wrong. I'm still here for the glass.
Also, the rattan chairs did typically come from Filipino prisons, so just to let y'all know about that. I believe they were just tourist things. They made Filipino prisoners make them as like a source of it, kind of like we do the license plates, I believe. Not that there's like, I mean, I'm not saying, you can't enjoy a rattan chair, but that is the history of them, just to let you know.
Yeah. I mean, I think someone said like 40% of the goods that are labeled as made in US are made by slave prison labor in the US. So
yeah. So
racism.
There's a big, but go and read off about, especially I believe the ones particularly in like the 30s and 40s were from Filipino prisons. But you can go read up on that.
Fun times. All right, I don't think we have any more questions, but is there anything else anybody wanted to talk about in terms of their costuming, their disability, all of the other stuff that they're doing, or their upcoming videos on the Make Do Amend movement? Nothing?
I'll talk briefly. Something I just want to touch on was that, specifically with like IBS, I deal with a lot of weight and waist changes. And I would just like to say historical costuming, y'all got that down. Everything is a tie or a lace. By the time my favorite period is the 50s, it's all zippers and buttons. So my personal struggle is how can I take a 50 silhouette and make it that it works at different sizes, and that's maybe a corset back, maybe it's shirring, not accurate, don't care. Maybe it's multiple snaps. I'm actually working on a skirt right now it's a really interesting closure that you can have multiple hooks. So yeah, just like that's definitely part of a disability thing that I haven't quite touched on is like, how do you make it for your disability? If you have a limb difference, how do you do that? Ashley talked about like how to make head coverings, but it can also apply to a disability. So my personal one is weight changes. So and there's a great Facebook page about accessible sewing, by the way, and people talk about how to put like feeding tubes into like baby onesies. So I definitely recommend, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like accessible sewing on Facebook. But that's also a huge part of disability costuming and sewing.
And there's a costuming with disability Discord, and I've put the link for that below as well. Lovely people who have every type of disability. And yeah, one thing I've noticed about the weight changes thing, I also use this a lot because I do theatrical costuming as well, is the apron closure skirts where you tie the front panel on the back and the back panel on the front, and it's just slightly open for a bit. You can have up to I think 10-inch difference in waist sizes, and if you use that as your skirt closure. And so I've had that we have two people doing the same role who are like 6 sizes different from each other. So yeah, trying to make a costume piece that'll fit them both or is adaptable, or even just putting like elasticated panels in the sides. Fun fact, that's what they did in Hamilton for the corsets that the ensemble are wearing, is the panels on the sides are actually elastic. They're just dyed to be the same color as the rest of the corset so that they can dance and move in them, because I don't know if I'd want to do backflips in a corset.
Can confirm, I was on that team.
Were you?
I was on the women's ensemble team for Hamilton.
Oh, we're gonna talk.
Well, I will tell you further, because the women's the women's ensemble has the corset looks that they wear with breeches and sometimes waistcoats. And the breeches are all 100% four-way stretch spandex with historical pattern shapes. And the waistcoats, the vest back is the same four-way stretch spandex, because they're doing like fight choreography and all kinds of stuff in those. And we're like, the designer doesn't want to give up the period silhouettes of all of these garments that they're wearing, but they can't move if that's a woven. So it's a super stretch, pretty much.
I love that. You heard it here first, folks. People are excited by that one in the chat. All right. Any other final comments from anybody?
Don't let your disabilities or neurodivergencies, your differences, prevent you from doing something that you want to do. I think a lot of us resonated with the fact that one of the reasons that costuming appeals to us is because we feel like crap so often. And I mean, that's one reason why I got into it. I wanted to feel good about myself. I wanted to do something, create something that was unique and special on days when I can't even shower. And we're living off of cereal and smoothies at our house sometimes. But, you know, just do what you love, and to hell with what other people say. If they want to give you crap for dressing in a certain way, like, it's your life. You're not hurting anybody by doing that. I mean, just do what you love.
And there's always a way. There's a way to make something work for your body. There's a way to make something work for your disabilities, for your neurodivergence. Like, oh my God, I have texture issues and I need to be able to touch fabrics before I buy them. There are places that will just mail you samples, throw them in an envelope. Here's samples of them, and you could touch them before buying them. There's always workarounds. And, you know, come to people like us. Like, a lot of us talk very openly about our disabilities on our channel, all the weird adaptations we make. Join a Discord, you know, talk to people who are like this. We will help you find a way, because there's nothing new under the sun. We've all had different things come up, and other people have figured out different ways of dealing with the same problem, but you'll have a community who will support you and show you that there is a way around. Even if you can only sew for 10 minutes a day, there's a way to make that work, if that's all you can do.
Yeah, I actually had a question for Rachel. So you talked about you have these like incredible coworkers. So how did you like foster that environment where everyone is like so supportive of you and very understanding?
I've been there for 17 years, so I've outlasted everybody that sucks. And and the way that the theater sees, you know, you may be wondering, like, how was I on the Hamilton team, which, you know, our theater season runs congruent with the academic year, and we have the summers off. So I, pre-pandemic, would often go to New York and just freelance work in a Broadway shop for a couple months. And it just happened to be the place that I was working. They put me onto the Hamilton team. Like, it was not like they hired me because I'm super special. I just want to clarify that. But the place that I work, you know, a lot of my assistants are like, I'm hierarchically at a place in the way the shop runs to where a lot of people start, and I'm the one that is showing them the ropes, or they're working with me directly, and I'm in a mentorship role. And I think that perhaps because I'm so open about, like, these are the difficulties that I struggle with, and I will need to rely upon you for XYZ, that so when someone's coming into a new work situation and their immediate supervisor admits to having these disabilities and challenges, it imbues them with some confidence of like, I can help you, even though I don't know how to do what you're about to show me how to do. You're showing it to me because you need me to do it. And it is a kind of reciprocity that just gets cultivated, I think, naturally, but because of the dynamics that are there.
And everyone should go watch Rachel's videos on how to work in costuming professionally and avoid the awful people that suck and are going to use you for your labor and not pay you what you're worth. So
yeah,
please.
super active in that wage equity and such. And actually, my last COSI video that's coming out this afternoon, or that's coming out Sunday afternoon, is about the jobs that costumers have pivoted into when COVID shut down the theater industry and the performing arts. A lot of people realized kind of how bad the working conditions were in many professional theatrical costume shops, and what are the jobs they've gone into. I talked to a lot of them, and there's a lot of obvious ones like bridal alterations or custom cosplay commissions, but then there were some that I was like, holy crap, that's a job, cool. So I made a video about it.
Ask me about making modesty garments for the film industry. That's a weird
Oh
one.
yes.
That's one I specialize in, actually, if anyone wants to know about modesty garments. If you don't know what they are, Google it. I'm not going to mention it here. But that's probably, I know we've kept you here for quite a long time, and knowing all of our bodies are awful, I appreciate everybody taking the time and the spoons to be here. Super appreciate everyone in the comments who has been lovely, and I love that everyone is sharing resources and helping. Please join the disability Discord server in the link below. Please go like and follow all of these amazing people and see what fabulous content they have. And then go drink some water, go do a stretch, and do at least one self-care. And that includes everyone in the panel too. But thank you so much to Fallon, Casca, Ashley, Rachel. You've all been amazing. It's been wonderful spending time with you and getting to know all of the stuff that you do. We have a lot of thank yous in the comments of everyone being super appreciative. And thank you to everyone in the comments for being amazing and lovely. I had several moderators there keeping an eye on things, and thank you for making them not needed by being just lovely, lovely humans. So yeah, that's it for me, and I'll do my standard close off of stay happy and healthy, stay safe, take care of each other, and we will see you all soon. Bye.
Bye.
And I hit end stream.
Oh, he's okay. Yeah. Do we not leave or like?
Hang on a